Good morning, Twilight. Love the new hairstyle. Well, happy Tuesday.
Really, Celestia? Really? When I opened myself up to requested reviews, It's About Time was what I didn't think too much about. Both this and Family Appreciation Day were two of the most forgettable episodes for me throughout Season 2. Now, that's not to say that it was bad, but it was pretty average. It's a filler episode to be sure, but it did have a good sense of entertainment that stood its grounds. This episode starts off with Twilight pacing around back and forth during the library in the middle of the night. She freaks out over how unorganized her overlong schedule has become. She is unsure of what to settle with first, so she spends all night until morning finishing her plans. A future Twilight suddenly appears looking all torn up with an eye patch, leaving an impression that something disastrous may have happened. She tries to warn her about the future outcome that startles the present Twilight, but unfortunately, with little time to spare and the extreme curiosity about time travel letting the current Twilight ramble on, the future self vanishes and then the warning is never given to her. Twilight gets worked up about this, trying to figure out what it is, so she goes throughout Ponyville telling everyone about this unknown warning.
My future self tried to warn me about a horrible disaster that's going to occur sometime before next Tuesday morning.
What kind of disaster?
I don't know. I got sucked back into the future before I could explain.
Whatever should we do, Twilight? How do we stop the disaster if we don't know what it is?
We'll just have to work together to make sure we're safe.
So they scan through the entire town, speculating any potentially oncoming disasters. Still, Twilight is concerned, and she periodically gets herself injured in mishap to eventually resembling of what future Twilight looks like.
The eye patch. Another sign. Nearly all the signs have come true. If Tuesday's tomorrow and the disaster happens by Tuesday morning, then there's only one solution. Stop time.
It's from this point on I was able to tell that nothing disastrous was going to happen. I already knew that everything Twilight was all worked up about was going to result into a false alarm and a time loop. As the episode ends, Twilight uses a spell she learned from the scrolls Pinkie found, which allows her to travel in the past to warn herself and not get all worked up to begin with. But alas, this results in finishing the time loop. It was predictable as it could get. But on the contrary, while I already debated what the outcome was, the entire scenario was cleverly put together, and just overall enjoyable. Watching all the dysfunctional madness get the best out of Twilight. Many seem to have complained that the episode could have been something more extravagant and possibly be a Doctor Who's episode, or have an epic event, but that completely misses the point of its moral. The message was that you shouldn't worry about the future and deal with what you have, but at the same time be mindful of what you're doing presently, since every action has a consequence. This was shortly demonstrated by Spike as his attempts throughout the episode was indulging ice cream, which eventually got himself a stomachache at the end. The humor in this episode was legit, though I wouldn't say I completely laughed my ass off. The only exception was when Pinkie Pie had a sense of enjoyment through panicking.
Any pony else want to panic with me? No?
I'm not going to lie. Watching her asking for someone to panic with her just felt so random that I couldn't help but laugh. It simply toyed and satirized the psychology of public panics whenever terror was at hand. As a matter of fact, Pinkie Pie, taking a major role in this episode with Twilight, remained silly but was also aware of many actions. Other episodes have unfortunately misused her in the sense of making her brainless. Thankfully, that wasn't the case here, because when she was present, some of her silliness and even to her own sense of awareness was supportive to Twilight throughout. The connections between the two fascinated me, having a huge contrast from Twilight, who was logical and yet loony, and Pinkie Pie was simple and silly, yet wise. It was a bit of a switcheroo, which was a nice little twist. A few rare appearances were also a pleasure to see, one of which was Cerberus, who showed up in Ponyville. With this and Iron Will as a Minotaur, it's nice to see that some traits from Greek mythology help expand the universe of the show. Other times I've seen other creatures who are mostly Persian or medieval mythos. We also get a mention of Starswirl the Bearded, who was mentioned in multiple episodes that hinted something to us until its revealance was shown in the Season 3 finale. MacGuffins for the win! If there's any issue I had, Pinkie hid a few items in the show, such as balls and trees or eye patches in different buildings in case of emergencies. Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's just lazy writing for sheer plot convenience. How in all hell do balls and trees and patches in buildings bear any emergency precautions? The better question is, why would you store an eye patch in a fireplace where filth and dirt can get in your eye and claim it to be an emergency precaution? I'm surprised Twilight didn't get pink eye after this. I know it's just nitpicking, but Larson, you're better than that. That's really as much as I can say. This probably isn't one of my best reviews that I've written, but to be completely fair, I don't think the plot of Time Loops could have been done any better than what we were given. It isn't a bad episode by any means, as I mentioned before, but it already started with a thin plot. but that managed to exploit upon itself through its moral, and that's a strong consideration. Whenever I watch the episode more, there is something that I can take from it, and that's pretty challenging to pull off. But in the end, aside from the moral it was establishing, it's still forgettable to me, and the biggest thing that I remember was the connections of Twilight and Pinkie Pie and its overall humor that's played out. Until next time, this is GoldenFox, and thank you all for listening.